RadioOrNot.com and SoFloRadio.com present The Nicole Sandler Show. Truth to power, baby.
Call out the instigators, because there's something in the air. We got to get together sooner or later, because the revolution's here, and you know it's right. We have got to get it together. We have got to get it together now.
Getting it together one more time live. It is the Nicole Sandler Show, Wednesday, February 26, 2014, live on RadioOrNot.com, live on SoFloRadio.com, live on TalkRadio1.com, live on FilterFreeRadio.com, and live this morning on Liberal Justice Radio on the TuneIn app and TuneIn.com. This is the last day of Nicole Sandler's much-needed vacation. After this, I need a vacation. So for those of you who are absolutely sick and tired of us, good news, Nicole is going to be back in action tomorrow morning right here live with you at Back to Normal on RadioOrNot.com tomorrow morning. And if you do like us being, Jacob Dean here and Skeptical Scott of Filter Free Radio, please check out our website at filterfreeradio.com. And you can also listen to our program Monday evenings on Nicole Sandler's Radio or Not Network, where we broadcast live Monday evenings. By my side, as always, is my super duper awesome mass producer, co-host, and kick-ass all-around brother from another mother of Filter Free Radio. He is live this morning in our nation's capital, as he always is, because he is a native Washingtonian in the Beltway. Mr. Skeptical Scott is in the house this morning.
Hello.
Morning. Are you there? Scott, man. Your mic is muted. Do I have the buttons wrong on this end? Can you hear me now? I got nothing from you, buddy. So
No, it helps if I plug the microphone in.
there we go. Hey,
The microphone's sitting in front of me, but it's not plugged in. Morning.
good morning. Good morning. Yeah, I've been there, done that.
Hello.
You get everything ready. You know what you're going to say. You got the music ready, and then you just forget to turn on the mic. Damn it.
Yeah, I'm sitting here ready to go. I'm like, wait, what? I don't understand.
Well, I'm talking to you. Don't you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I'm a little tired. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm very tired, not going to lie, and got our coffee, and we've got all of our news, and I want to mention again, this is our last show in for Nicole Sandler. It's been an honor. It's been a privilege. I always appreciate the conversation. We enjoy participating with you at RadioOrNot.com in the chat room for free. I just want to mention this is our last day filling in for Nicole, and this also is potentially your last day to call into the show, to go live on the air. I don't know how often Nicole takes your phone calls live on whatever you want to talk about, but if you want and you dare to speak your voice and speak your mind and participate, by all means, bring it on. All of the callers today go directly to the front of the line. If you call, you're going to go immediately right to air. The only exception to that is if we already have a caller on the line, or if we have our news from Talk Radio News on the line. I only have one line, so as long as it's open, you're good to go. Call us. Callers go to the front of the line. Anything you want to say, anything you want to talk about, I want to give you an opportunity to do it. It's 503-746-TALK, 503-746-8255. All callers will go to the front of the line. So there you go. Call us. Anything you want to talk about in the news. Lots happening in the news. I want to run through some news headlines that we should know. And then for the rest of the show, I wanted to do a kind of pickup on where we left off at the end of last week on Thursday. We played about 20 minutes or so of Scott and I's favorite audio clips, kind of talking about what is filter-free radio about, what do we stand for, what do we want to do, who do we like and focus on, and what is what is our mission statement? What are we trying to do? And
Yeah,
we're gonna
the wisdom of the intellectuals that we've learned from and have formed our opinions. And it's like when I say things to people when they say, "Oh, you're crazy," I'm saying, "No, this is where I learned this from, and this is who said this, and this, that, and the other thing." And the Noam Chomsky's, Cornel West, Chris Hedges, Slavoj Žižek, John Pilger, Amy Goodman, Howard Zinn. Gotta love Howard Zinn. All these luminaries who have studied and are activists in our own right, or have studied society's evolution and understand the catalyst of what makes our systems go or not go, and who really controls things. And it's incumbent upon us to step outside the so-called mainstream and not to believe everything we're told, and to ask these tough questions. And these individuals are able to ask these tough questions and articulate, I think, more cogently than even you or I could, what is really happening to us and what we need to do about it.
question authority, question the media. That's why we're here now, seeking out independent, alternative, radical, truth-telling media that's not more bullshit from the corporate media, which you know now, and you come to expect it. That's why you're here. And we're going to go through some of our favorite clips, like Scott mentioned, of Cornel West, of Saul Alinsky, of Noam Chomsky, stuff that we haven't played yet. We're going to get into that Mario Savio clip. We're going to play some John Pilger, get back into some George Carlin we haven't got to yet, play some Glenn Greenwald. Hey, I even have some Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President FDR, on standby, and some Dylan Ratigan, Desmond Tutu, you name it. Hey, if there's a special clip...
And the one from the 1920s, who is it?
1908, you're thinking of William Jennings Bryan.
Bryan, yeah.
On campaign finance reform.
Yeah, from 100 years ago. That's
from
awesome.
over 100 and now 6 years ago. I'll play that clip too. And if there's a special clip that you've heard before or you like and you want us to play, call in. 503-746-TALK. News headlines this morning. President Obama has warned Afghan President Hamid Karzai in a phone call yesterday that the United States may pull all of its troops out of his country by the year's end. We can only hope. Karzai has refused to sign a security agreement, and this disagreement over the bilateral security agreement is the latest step in the long and deteriorating relationship between the United States and Afghanistan, which is now the longest war in American history. And the White House.
It's not a war.
What's that?
But it's not a war.
Yeah, right. There's that. Yeah, and the White House doesn't even appear to completely rule out leaving behind some kind of post end of the year presence without an agreement. They said, furthermore, quote, White House statement, quote, furthermore, the longer we go without a BSA, the more likely it will be that any post-2014 U.S. mission will be smaller in scale and ambition, end quote. In other words, whether or not you get an agreement out of Karzai or not, we might just leave presence there. So who knows? And Karzai is so corrupt. That's a whole different conversation, right? So not even going to go there. Unless you want to go there. 503-746-TALK. Anything you want to talk about, it's all good.
Imagine any other leader of any other so-called sovereign nation saying, we're really tired of having your military on our soil. Can you please leave? And we're like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
That sounds like an occupation.
It does.
Whether what we believe, how corrupt their government is or not, and it is corrupt. And let's face it, Karzai is our puppet anyway. We put him in power. Yeah. So unless he goes against us, then we'll take him out like Saddam Hussein.
We don't have to go around the world shoving democracy down everyone's throat. If you have a really good idea, you don't have to force it on people. They will steal it from you. So
yeah, Dick Gregory.
Yeah. So
yes, that's the whole. Come on, we're there for that rare mineral that makes your SIM cards in your phone. I don't even know what it's called, but it's one of those rare earth minerals that's highly present in Afghanistan.
The other thing that's big in Afghanistan is lithium for the batteries. That was a
okay,
huge story like a couple of years ago that has gone completely under the radar. Everyone's like, why are we in Afghanistan anyways? Why is Afghanistan such a big deal? There's no oil in Afghanistan. Maybe a little bit. It's the lithium, people. The lithium. But maybe Snork will come on Filter Free Radio one of these times and talk about why is lithium so important? Because, that's our go-to guy there, Snork, in the chat room on those all topics,
all chemistry and science.
chemistry, ecology, etc. Right, environmental, good stuff. So hey, Snark, if you want to call in and tell us why lithium is so important, give us a call, man. Other news: the NSA. More news from the NSA. Lawyers from the office. Now this is interesting. I think. Oh wait, this is not the right story. Okay, I have my stories mixed up here. Just a second. Lawyers from the Office of DNI and the DOJ have presented the White House with 4 options for reconstructing the NSA's controversial phone surveillance program ahead of a March 28th deadline. And they were trying to come up with ways to take it out of the NSA's hands, right? Listen to the proposals of how they can restructure. This is from the Office of the DNI and the DOJ. How they're going to restructure how the NSA is recording all of our phone conversations, all the data, all the internet, everything. This is their proposals. One way would have cell phone companies themselves retain the data. Oh, terrific. And then the NSA would just go to them when they need searches. Ah, right, because, that would work. As long as it's not the NSA spying on us, it's our own phone companies spying on us. That's fine with us, right?
Let's privatize the NSA as if they weren't bad enough already. We'll just turn it over to corporate industry and they can spy on us all day. Oh my God. Let's make a bad situation worse, right?
Yeah. The good news about that option is the phone companies themselves also oppose this approach because they're concerned of liability protection. Justifiably so.
They write the law to give them, limited liability or whatever you want to call it.
Another proposal to restructure the NSA's spying apparatus. Another option would have a government agency other than the NSA hold the data. Like the FBI or,
or create a whole new entity. That's what we need, more bureaucracy.
Yeah. Or, even the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. Sure, let them have it. I'm sure the judges want all of the extra work, A third option would be for the entire entity outside of the NSA to hold the data, a completely independent third party, right? Privacy groups say a third party would just become an extension of the NSA and would actually not provide any additional privacy benefits to we the people. Kind of makes sense. Oh, but wait, there's one more option. Remember, there's 4 options to rescale this NSA. And which one of these do you like the best, right? The final option would be to scrap the phone data program altogether and instead bolster investigative efforts under current authorities to obtain the information about possible terrorist connections some other way. You mean like follow the rules?
Wow, you mean like actually abide by the 4th Amendment and get a warrant for these things and not do, massive surveillance, which is all illegal anyway? Sounds like a good one.
If I was going to pick an option, I'm just saying, I'd pick the latter, the last one.
I mean, the interesting thing is none of these actually indicate how absolutely useless this is for actually stopping terrorists. I mean, all the systems were in place, pre 9/11 to stop the terrorist attacks. They were just ignored and not used, and not, the 2 interagencies weren't communicating. And let's face it, Bush said, yeah, whatever, 4 times, went with the presidential daily briefings, et cetera, et cetera. So, the fact of the matter is, none of this is necessary in the first place. However, it sure works really well with squashing any kind of civil uprising that we may have. I mean, just look what they did to Occupy.
Yeah.
And it's and of course there's also the evidence out there that they try and paint Julian Assange as a terrorist along with the Taliban and Alexa O'Brien, the journalist with USDRH, that's the Stratfor Files, remember, where they tried to paint her as a terrorist. And so That's really, I think, the function of the NSA at this point is to protect these systems of power and not to prevent another terrorist attack. It's far more. I mean, let's face it, we're surveilling our own people far more than we are on a on an international scale. We're doing it far more domestically because the resources are there. Everything is set up. We own all the systems, but they own all the phone systems, all the wires, all the cameras on every street corner. I mean, it's you name it. So. Yeah. Big Brother's watching, and George Orwell was right.
Yeah, right. Hey, and that's a good reminder for us to mention that. Hey, NSA, thanks for listening. At least somebody is. There we go. Okay.
Hi, NSA.
Hey, and Snork mentions, it's not just the NSA, right? Oh yeah. Well, hey everybody, thanks for listening.
That's right. It's the FBI, of course, domestically, CIA internationally, and Homeland Security, and all the other boondoggles that are out there.
You guys don't have to hide. I mean, the chat room is open. It's free. Just log in, say hi, type, radioornot.com. We've got 24 people in there right now that want to say hi. And
oh, I'm sure one of the anonymous people are working for the government.
Somebody in there's listening, right? Is it you? No.
Remember they interviewed that. What is it? Eventually that they even the Stasi state, and of course even during the Church Commission, they have apparently infiltrated Quaker groups and knitting circles. I mean, they infiltrated in every little niche of
everything,
of everything, of things that have nothing to do with any kind of uprising or resistance and certainly anything we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, or right back, like Scott mentioned, the example of the Occupy movement and how it was suppressed. I mean, how many times did it come out that, those stories of those isolated incidences of violence turned out to be...
agent provocateurs.
Exactly. It wasn't actually people from the Occupy movement, but rather, who were these guys?
Well, apparently the Black Bloc was almost completely infiltrated. And, I mean, there's even stories of I can't remember who it was that said this. He's like, yeah, I stood there. Actually, it was the guy we interviewed that one time at Occupy DC.
Charlie. His name was Charlie.
Yeah, he's like, I stood there and watched this van open up, and four guys get out who are obviously agents, dressed like, average college students with their backpacks and stuff, but they're wearing wires, and it's like, good grief.
Actually, I have like, I pulled up, we've got like 25 clips of that conversation. And that
was pretty neat.
Yeah, that was really cool. That was actually, he was talking, what we're talking about here is Scott and I were very involved in the Occupy DC movement. We were there on day one as President Obama drove by in his motorcade, and we were there on the very last day when it was raided and they shut it down and closed it down and dumped everything.
Forcefully removed everybody out of the park.
And I'm going to play this clip real quick from Charlie. This fellow was a kind of a permanent resident of the Occupy DC encampment and an activist there. And this is Charlie, Occupy DC activist, describing how the police state overreached and shut down Occupy DC, specifically how they did it.
The cops had pushed us with their shields, and a lot of people were falling over. And I was inside the information tent, so they were kind of falling over in front of me. So me and this other guy started, pulling the females out, because the females were the ones that, were freaking out. They were, and they were stuck under like 20 other people, because, people were just, it was like human bowling. They really just bowled right through us. When they'd hit us, you'd literally see one or two people flying. They were hitting us that hard, just like a bowling, like human bowling pins.
And
Jesus, can you imagine? And that's just how you get rid of a peaceful occupation. Nice.
Yeah. And this that's an important point to mention, that you always got to maintain the moral high ground. Always stick to nonviolence. Let them overreach with violence. Let that it's gonna hurt, but you're gonna have to take that blunt. Take that pepper spray. Take that human bowling. And not reciprocate with any violence whatsoever. Only show them love. The police are part of we the people. They're part of the 99%, right? And once we reach across that line, that divide, and say, hey, brother, we're all in this together. We're fighting for you, and you're protecting us. But, it's like we're on the same side here. Once you break down that paradigm and we get everyone together, the police,
Oh yeah,
included.
once the rank and file
Right.
police turn against their superiors, then we've won. And that's one of the most important things to remember about resistance movements and about actual change in society is that when the enforcers, the jackboots of the corporate state, refuse to obey the corporate state and actually, comply and agree with the protesters, well, then it's over. Then those in power have no means of enforcement, and they have to step down.
Other news, I'll mention quickly that the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations is trying to go after some of these offshore Swiss bank accounts and the methods that they use. The uber rich, they're going after this one Swiss banking giant that is holding and hiding currently about 22,000 wealthy American citizens' accounts, totaling up to $12 billion in assets, all because they're trying to avoid paying taxes because they're so patriotic and pro-American that they don't even want to pay their taxes. There's that. If you want to talk about that, we can get into that. John Kerry on the Ukraine. It's not East versus West. If you want to talk about that, that's cool. The House GOP's immigration support is dismal. We can talk about that if you want. Anything goes. Callers go to the front of the line. It's our last show in for Nicole Sandler, 503-746-TALK, 503-746-8255. U.S. ambassadors have a no confidence vote coming up, and the House GOP is going to recall Lois Lerner. Big whoop. Get over it. And hey, if you want to talk about it, it's all good.
Yeah, no, I'm so out of touch with the who the personalities are in this game. I'm just more aware of how it works. Like I don't know who any of those people are. It doesn't really matter, quite frankly. The names change, but the game is the same.
Hey, there we go, right? You can change the players, but you can't change the game, and the game has become so rigged now that the previous tactics, the previous game plans don't work anymore. Time to progress forward. When did progressives stop progressing? That's a question I want to know.
1960s.
Something like that. 60s, 70s, I don't know. But there are many out there who don't sell out. There are many out there that stick to their morals and stand their ground. People like when we interviewed S. Brian Wilson, this is a guy, in his latter years, and we interviewed him at the closed Guantanamo Bay protest. It's on the website. We actually played that interview one of the previous times we filled in for Nicole Sandler, and I asked him. I said, how do you stay motivated? What keeps you going? And I love Brian's answer. It was words to the effect of, I don't care who knows about what I'm doing. If it's just me and the universe, and that's all that knows about what I'm doing, that's fine with me. I have to do something. I have to speak my mind. I have to get active. I have to dissent.
Well, he has a conscience. He's like, I know that what I'm doing is right and moral, and if nobody else knows, at least I can sleep at night because I know what I'm doing and that I'm actually doing something. He was the guy, his book is called Blood on the Tracks. He was on Democracy Now! A couple years ago about how he lost his legs protesting the move of nuclear, what was it? Basically, they blockaded train tracks out there that were moving nuclear material in order to build nuclear weapons or nuclear warheads. And then the train, instead of stopping, sped up and ran him over. Yeah, and he was lucky to be alive, but he's still protesting. It didn't deter him.
Nope. I like what Will from Chicago in the Radio or Not chat room mentions. He says, if Dr. Martin Luther King and people as old as Rabbi Abraham and Joshua Heschel was able to face down police on the Selma Bridge, then we can surely follow their example. And he also mentions, I didn't know this, but Dr. King tried to persuade Joshua Heschel, who was in his 50s, not to march because he was older, and Heschel said that he had a moral duty to do so and did so. So there you go, right? And Abby mentions Chris Hedges' quote, better to do suffer wrong than to do wrong.
Yeah, he actually is quoting Socrates there.
Right.
Yeah, it's better to suffer wrong than to do wrong. And that comes to part of the Mario Savio quote, where you can no longer passively, accept what is happening, and you have to, resist.
Yeah.
And that's, struggle. The word struggle and suffer go hand in hand, because it's not easy. It's not, it's not a party.
Right.
It's not something anyone really wants to do. But in
Right.
order to struggle, you have to do a little bit of suffering, and your conscience can let you sleep at night knowing that you're doing the right thing,
Right.
even in the face of what seems like overwhelming odds.
Right. Activism does not quit. Mobilizing and working to elect a Democratic president may seem like activism, but activism does not stop. The struggle does not stop. If you look at our last Filter Free Radio episode, 106, Successful Social Movements, there are 8 stages to successful social movements for real hope and real change. The 8th step of successful social movements is to keep on fighting. Never stop. And once you actually organize a successful social movement, get the masses educated, motivated, involved, participating, you bring about real change and hope to the people, and you actually create a change or a solution, and it comes to fruition. After that point, guess what you have to do? You have to take up a new issue, because that's the reality. There's so much out there. And Scott, you mentioned this clip that we play at the end of every show we do. It's a clip. It's a very famous clip. And just about everyone will recognize it, I hope. And we play it at the end of our filter-free radio shows. We play it at the end of when we fill in for Nicole Sandler, at the end of every show. It's one of those clips that I totally would love to play every single show, and we do it. I don't play the whole clip. Actually, it's a truncated, edited clip for time, as always. I don't edit anything to take out content. I edit things just to tighten it up a little bit for time's sake. We only get 2 hours. And I want to play this whole clip. This is actually 1 minute and 20 seconds long. This is the whole Mario Savio clip on the operation of the machine. Once the operation of the machine becomes so odious, you have to do something about it, right? Listen to this.
Told the following: if President Kerr actually tried to get something more liberal out of the regents in his telephone conversations, why didn't he make some public statement to that effect? And the answer we received from a well-meaning liberal was the following. He said, would you ever imagine the manager of a firm making a statement publicly in opposition to his board of directors? That's the answer. Well, I ask you to consider, if this is a firm, and if the Board of Regents are the Board of Directors, and if President Kerr, in fact, is the manager, then I tell you something, the faculty are a bunch of employees, and we're the raw materials. But we're a bunch of raw materials that don't mean to have any process upon us, don't mean to be made into any product, don't mean to end up being bought by some clients of the university, be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone.
We're not for sale.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
If that doesn't get you fired up, I don't know what will. So we'll
That was on the steps of Sproul Hall, December 2nd, 1964, on campus of Berkeley.
We'll continue this unfiltered, radical, truth-telling conversation on the Nicole Sandler Show after a real quick coffee warm-up break. We're live on RadioOrNot.com, SoFlowRadio.com, TalkRadio1.com, FilterFreeRadio.com, and Liberal Justice Radio on the TuneIn app and TuneIn.com. We'll be right back.
Questioning Authority Daily. The Nicole Sandler Show.
Hi, friends. This is Tom Hartman.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks.
I'm Brad Friedman. I approve of Nicole Sandler's RadioOrNot.com.
Radio or Not.
Radio or Not.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com.
Hey friends, Jacob Dean here with exciting news. You can now hear my show, Filter Free Radio, on the free Stitcher mobile app. Just download the free Stitcher app from Stitcher.com or in the App Store and search for Filter Free Radio. That's all there is to it. No syncing, no taking up memory on your device. Just Filter Free Radio on demand for you on the go. Plus, you can rate and review Filter Free Radio on Stitcher. The more you rate, review, and share us, the higher we will rank on Stitcher, and that means the more people will discover Filter Free Radio. It's never been easier to enjoy Filter Free Radio and help us spread the word. So download the free Stitcher app, search for Filter Free Radio, and start benefiting from unfiltered radical truth-telling anytime, anywhere. Thanks, and keep up the good fight.
From the Gatling gun to the nuclear bomb, from hot air balloons to drones, the military has enlisted scientists to develop ever more effective war technologies. But now comes a long-sought scientific breakthrough that the military brass considers the ultimate advantage for battlefield effectiveness: ready-to-eat pizzas. With the spare-no-expense determination usually associated with something like the Manhattan Project, teams of the best scientific minds at the U.S. Army Natick Soldier Research and Engineering Center have been focused intently on this secret pizza project. It seems that the combat troops have been asking, even begging, that the individual field rations they get, called meals ready to eat, include pizza. Not easily done, however. MREs are prepackaged, shipped to faraway combat zones, and stored for months. Problem is that the sauce, cheese, and toppings of pizza contain moisture that turns the dough soggy, allowing bacteria to grow, spoil the pie, and poison the eaters. Using humectants, food engineers were able to stop the moisture from reaching the dough, but that was not the end of it, for the Army was gunning for the holy grail of MREs, a prepackaged pizza that could be stored in 80-degree heat without refrigeration for 3 years and still be fresh. At last, the scientists have announced VP Day. By adding acid to the ingredients and iron filings to the packaging, science has triumphed over nature, delivering a pizza that's literally for the ages. This is Jim Hightower saying, perhaps you're wondering about taste. Well, picky. After 3 years, the crust is not exactly crisp, and the things are not served hot, so these are hardly the pies of Mario Batali. However, Mario doesn't do battlefield deliveries. But wait, that could be a good use of drones.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to the Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Greg Palast, I realized as we were talking that actually we were supposed to do this on Wednesday, so thank you so much for bearing with me.
Well, I am thrilled that we were doing that. You've jumped the other characters. Because, Nicole, I just think that your show is brilliant, and I want to thank you because my stuff may be prime time in Britain. But here, I keep slamming into the electronic Berlin Wall, and you have snuck me across and into the information stream. And I hope that your listeners are aware of how important and precious your program is. So I want to thank you.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime at RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com and SoFloRadio.com present The Nicole Sandler Show. Truth to power, baby.
Welcome back to the Nicole Sandler Show. Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott of Filter Free Radio filling in our very last day, filling in for Nicole Sandler. Nicole is back tomorrow, back in action, back to normal. All is well. If you're tired of us, hey, Nicole's back tomorrow. If you're not, check out filterfreeradio.com. You might dig it. Real quick, we just played the commercial there, or the spot of Nicole speaking with Greg Palast back in the day. If you go check out Democratic Underground this morning, the DU Democratic Underground has on their little highlight clips on the side of their website, they have a clip of Nicole Sandler up right now talking with Greg Palast. And It doesn't get any better as far as investigative journalism than the likes of the Greg Palaces or the Jeremy Scahills of the world. So go check that out. If you're just jonesing for Nicole right now, there's a cool clip with Nicole and Greg Palast up at DemocraticUnderground.com. And Nicole Sandler is going to be back in action with you back here tomorrow. So good news all around there. And again, it is our last day in for Nicole Sandler. It is your last opportunity to call in and make your voice heard on the airwaves, 503-746-TALK. If you don't have a cell phone and it costs money to call that number, you can hop on your Skype for free and Skype us. It's Jacob_Dean. Otherwise, 503-746-TALK is the telephone number. And a couple of more news headlines I want to mention. And then for the rest of the show, I want to play some clips. All sorts of good clips. And anything Scott wants to hear, he gets to hear it. And we'll share with you.
All right.
Yeah, I have to mention this story because it's a little scary that a Washington, D.C. based whistleblower group is reporting that they have had a very suspicious break-in at their office in Washington, D.C. The Project on Government Oversight says unknown people have appeared to broke in, shuffled papers on employees' desks, and have attempted to open file cabinets, all while leaving computers and other valuable items behind. Police determined that the break-in was related to the group's work, which centers on exposing waste, fraud, and abuse by the government, particularly by the Pentagon. Have you heard that story anywhere? Didn't think so.
Can you say Watergate?
And if you have heard that story somewhere, it was probably on Democracy Now! Because they're about the only ones who can speak the truth anymore.
It wasn't on a mainstream so-called corporate media.
Yeah, so you have the Project on Government Oversight, a whistleblower group that focuses on exposing waste, fraud, and abuse by the government, and they have had a suspicious break-in at their office in Washington, D.C. Anyways, I'm just saying, meanwhile, in the rest of the world, residents of Beijing can't go outside because it's too polluted. They've had residents of Beijing have suffered through a full week, more than a week now, of super heavy smog. And just a couple of days ago, authorities issued the second highest level of pollution alert for a second time after it was used for the very first time ever last Friday. So the first time that they've ever used their pollution alert, they have to immediately go to the second highest level of that pollution alert, which is a orange alert. And during an orange alert, children and the elderly cannot go outside. That is how bad the pollution is. Some factories said they are going to shut down in a bid to curb the pollution, but the reality is that's an exception, not the majority. And you can see the pollution from space. Wow.
Yeah, fossil fuels. All right, good job, China.
I like air without taste. That's just me. Just me.
You like that metallic taste in your air? It's nice,
Don't you like water without taste and air without taste?
Yeah, I had some water last night at a restaurant that tasted like cardboard. that was a little disconcerting.
Yeah, I mean...
But hey, it's DC tap water for you.
We cannot eat money, and we cannot drink oil. If there's nothing else you ever take away from Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott, take away the fact that you cannot eat money and you cannot drink oil. Okay? Just saying.
That speaks to the conversations I have with people on a regular basis where they're like, oh, my 401k is doing great, and oh man, I'm going to put my money and buy gold. So because those who understand that the market's going to collapse and perhaps even listen to Alex Jones or something, or even maybe our libertarians and hate the Fed like everybody else. It's like, I got my 401k, I'm going to buy gold, I'm going to buy, these pieces of silver or whatever that I can use for trade, and this, that, and the other, and it's just, it's really just not asking the right questions, because what you need to be doing if you have any kind of money to invest in your future is to be as self-sufficient as possible. And by that I mean get off the grid, get solar panels, get wind, so that when our teetering and fragile infrastructure does collapse, you have electricity, and obviously get some water filters of clean water, and then grow your own food, have a garden, and form communities, and go to farmers markets and get to know your neighbors, and so you can trade. If you're growing tomatoes and they got some pork or something, pigs or chickens or eggs or whatever, and you can trade. The barter and trade system will be all that's left once our entire economic system goes down, because again, you can't eat gold, and who wants a piece of gold when they can't feed themselves? And it's relatively just like the paper. Obviously, the currency will become meaningless, just like the Weimar Republic. If anyone remembers pictures of the Weimar Germany, when there people had wheelbarrows of money, and they were using it to heat their homes with, literally, because they were showing bricks of cash that they were just throwing in the wood burning stove to keep themselves warm, because the money was worthless and they were freezing to death. Mm-hmm. That's just an example of what could and will likely happen to our bubble-based economy. And so it's important to be realistic about how do you take care of yourself. And I think the return to an agrarian society is what's much needed as this post-industrial era falls upon us. And so, really, get your money out of the stock market, because I keep trying to tell people, it's like the goal is not to make money from your money. The goal is to not lose the money you've made.
Yeah.
Because there is no, the stock market's at what, 15,000? I can't even, the Dow Jones.
Yeah, it's like 15, 16. The bubble's about to pop any minute.
Yeah, I can't even remember. I stopped paying attention, but
even Tom Hartman's new book is called The Great Crash of 2016. What are we going to do about
really?
it?
Oh, good for him. He actually has a. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's good then. It's the whole thing. It's like when Clinton left office, I think that the Dow Jones was at 2,600. Now it's at 15,000, 16,000.
Yeah.
So in the 70 years up to that era, it never got above 3,000, and now it's quadruple that, and it's insane. It's insane. It's a casino economy.
Yeah.
And it will crash.
Yeah.
So really, just in order to buttress yourself, I think it's incumbent upon us to ask the right questions about sustainability, and sustainability is ecology.
It's not just a house of cards, but it's a house of cards built on quicksand, and it's sinking. And you talk about sustainability. These people want infinite growth. Infinite growth on a finite planet is impossible. Period.
Yeah, and it's the whole our electrical grid is crap, man. I can't tell you how many times a year we lose power here.
Yeah.
It's like if I just had solar, wind, and didn't need the, and actually I'd be lucky enough to live on a well, and get off of the water and septic.
Yeah.
So you can be guaranteed to have, well, at least unless they poison your well, have clean, renewable water, rather than when the whole infrastructure collapses. Like we had a water main break here not too long ago, and something like 100,000 people were without water and sewage for 3 or 4 days until they replaced the main pipe. It's like they were asked to go somewhere else and shower and drink water. It's just, it's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the Roman Empire had running water too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you remember the Roman Empire also made celebrities out of their chefs right before it collapsed.
Yeah, right. Don't you love that? I love telling people that. That's the whole from Lee Camp's Moment of Clarity, and from Sir John Glubb in his Fate of Empires essay from 1977, where he talks about how, I think it was the Spanish, the Ottoman, and the Roman empires, toward the end of their reign, that made celebrities out of their chefs. Sound familiar?
Paula Deen and
right.
These guys don't like that very much.
Yeah, they don't want to hear that.
I want to mention really quick, just a note from yesterday's show. If you tuned in yesterday when Scott and I were filling in, we had a great conversation with a good friend of ours and investigative journalist Mark Taylor Canfield out of Seattle. We completely forgot to mention Mark's latest article during the hour-long conversation, and I wanted to mention that in case you were digging what Mark was talking about. Mark has got an article up at Op-Ed News titled "Seattle Hosts Progressive Media Gathering, Is Radio Dead?" And it was just posted this week, and it's a great article. Essentially, the conversation that we touched a little bit on yesterday, but I wanted to mention that article, and I also want to mention that we posted a link to that article on our Facebook page, facebook.com/filterfreeradio, for anyone who wants to read that article and was interested in the conversation we had yesterday. It's a good read, and I hope that you check it out. And apropos of that conversation, I want to start shifting into some of these clips, because if I don't start now, we're not going to get to all of them. And kind of apropos of the conversation we had yesterday with Mark Taylor Canfield on what's going on with Seattle, this is a very important clip to kind of start to break down the common group think that so many of us are beholden to now. And I want to talk about, and I want to play this clip from the newly elected Seattle Socialist City Council member, Shama Savant, talking, and this is her on Democracy Now! When she was interviewed on the day that she was elected, the first Socialist City Council member elected in a really long time, I think in 50, 60 years, and why she was running as a socialist, why she was running as an Occupy movement candidate, not a Democrat, not a Republican, but as a socialist, and how important it is to break down the left and right paradigm.
Why did you decide to run as a socialist?
The first thing is I'm a member of Socialist Alternative, which is a nationwide organization of social and economic justice activists, and that by itself presents a really different way of organizing politics and political actions, where it is not simply up to me as some sort of superstar, but really a democratic decision among large numbers of people saying, you know, year after year, we are asked to vote for Democrats or Republicans, and nothing changes. Wall Street is making historically high profits since the recession broke out, and the burden of the recession has fallen squarely on the shoulders of ordinary working people. How do we come out of this? What is the way forward? And presenting a different type of electoral politics was extremely important to me and to everybody else who was involved in this campaign. And there were hundreds of people who worked on this campaign. And the important thing about running as a socialist is, you know, for one, to show that there is a definite openness for clear alternatives, not only to the big business parties, but the system that they represent, the capitalist system. And if you look at recent polls, they show that people, especially young people, are much more open to socialism than you would find out from the corporate media. People are also fed up with the political dysfunction. 60% of Americans recently said that they are looking for a political alternative to the Democrats and Republicans.
Oh, I can't vote for the Green Party because the Green Party would never win. Bullshit. Oh, I can't vote for the Green Party because if too many of us vote for the Green Party, then the Democratic Party is not going to win. What what alternatives does the Democratic Party present to you now? And I mean, OpenDebates2016.com is a website that we're partnering with, and we're working on making third-party candidates a real force for 2016. I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't vote your conscience and you don't vote your morals, and anytime you vote and you feel like, oh, I'm not sure, it's the lesser of the two evils, but I don't really like some of the things, you're compromising. Anytime you compromise when you vote, you're voting for the wrong thing.
Yeah, you're compromising your morals. You're selling yourself out. I mean, so it doesn't matter, really. I mean, the two-party system is so corrupt and so broken, and obviously these two people serve the wealthy business interests that are paying them to be elected. I mean, $1 billion presidential campaign. I mean, where did $1 billion, $1,000 million come from? It came from Wall Street. It came from oil. It came from all these big military-industrial complex industries, Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin. You know, it's just, it didn't sure as hell didn't come from you and I, and that's who they serve. And the fact of the matter is, they're both evil, and there is no lesser. There's only one that's more, to quote Glenn Ford, there's only the more effective evil and the less effective evil, but they're both evil.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about a more effective evil. This is a point that I made on Talking Left last week ago or 2 weeks ago now on Talking Left with Shano and Danielle, and I was surprised when Danielle said, "Oh, I've never heard of that idea before." But the idea that Obama, as a Democratic president, is a more effective evil because only a Democratic president could cut Social Security, could fast-track the TPP, could suppress media, could suppress free speech,
could kill American citizens,
and get a bunch of so-called Democrats to go along with it. You know, it's like the argument, only Richard Nixon could have gone to China, only a Republican could have gone to China at that time. Only a Democratic president today could do these things and get the people to go along with it. And it's not just a Democratic president, it's President Obama, which is a different category, in my opinion.
I mean, it's remarkable. Like, if let's play the assume game and then assume that Mitt Romney won, was trying to do all these things. You better believe the Democratic Party would be out there screaming and hollering against it, and they might even galvanize resistance, on a national scale from the population because of these ridiculous things. But they're the ones doing it, and so everyone's like passive. It's insane.
And if you're saying, well, how come no one said anything about this before it happened? Here is Chris Hedges in 2010 telling us that Obama is going to cut Social Security, and this is from 2010, 4 years ago.
We're going into debt. I mean, we're building a kind of debt peonage system, which is used then as an excuse to go after wage earners, to go after systems like Social Security. This became a very prominent theme that Martin Luther King beat home, especially in the last years of his life during the Vietnam War. I mean, one of the most pernicious things that Obama did in this tax bill was reduce contributions to Social Security, because, of course, that's next on the target, as well as raise the deficit by $900 billion.
That was Chris Hedges predicting Obama was going to cut Social Security back in 2010. And as the more effective evil, the evil of the two lessers.
They had to quote Dwayne in the chat room.
Yeah, right. Don't you like that? He can do it, and he can get away with it. And there's no moral outrage from the so-called left. I mean, if you criticize Obama, you don't even get to go on MSNBC anymore. I mean, give me a break.
Right.
Give me
you
a
should
break.
play that William Jennings Bryan clip now, because that's like 100 years old and more relevant than ever.
Yeah. Okay, I need to get that one ready. Give me just a second.
I mean, it just speaks to the undue influence, I think, to use his quote, of money in politics. And you have to remember where we were in the Industrial Revolution at that time.
Yeah.
And obviously the robber barons, and we have our own robber barons today, and it's nothing new under the sun,
Yeah, this is a clip from 1908, exactly 106 years ago. At the time, William Jennings Bryan was a candidate for president, a far left socialist candidate. And of course, as you can imagine, we don't know of any President William Jennings Bryan, so he didn't actually win the election. But he made a really good point, and this is an old wax cylinder recording, so it's going to sound, the audio is going to be a little rough. Do your best to make out what he's saying here. He's talking about campaign finance reform. He's talking about transparency, and this is 106 years ago. William Jennings Bryan, 1908.
An election is a public affair. It is held for the benefit of the public and is the means through which the people select their officials and give directions as to the policies to be adopted. There is no sound reason for secrecy in regard to campaign methods, for the people ought to know what influences are at work in the campaign, that they may better decide whether either party has so obligated itself to the great corporation as to make it impossible for it to protect the rights of the people. Let there be light is the demand of the voters. If there are any who love darkness rather than light, it is because their deeds are evil.
Now you tell me, why does a so-called liberal left-leaning media outlet, I don't know, let me pick a random example, Media Matters, how come Media Matters is supposed to be a left-leaning liberal media outlet, only plays clips of Ted Nugent, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and they don't ever play anything from Noam Chomsky or Cornel West or John Pilger or Chris Hedges or William Jennings Bryan from 106 fucking years ago saying, we got a problem, need to get money out of elections. What are we going to do about it? Nope. Meanwhile, Ted Nugent called Obama a black man. Get the fuck over it, and let's focus on something that matters. Stop wasting your time.
I love your point. You made this a while ago that like outlets like so-called MSNBC or whatever spend more time playing the crap from the right wing on their air, which in other words, we wouldn't know about this because we don't watch the Fox News, but they'll play it for you on their outlet so you know about it, and then they'll, of course, rebut it as if that's news or even relevant information. I mean, there's the whole, actually this brings me to a Chris Hedges clip where he talks about confusing a way we're made to feel with rational thought and confusing propaganda with ideology. And that's what we're doing. They're confusing this propaganda with ideology, and then they're pushing back against this propaganda, and it's just more propaganda. And it's all within the confines of the box that maintains the status quo, rather than saying, "Oh, this is just BS," and ignoring it because it's what it is. It's a distraction in the first place.
So, in other words, what you're saying, Scott, is you're pretty skeptical of MSNBC.
Oh, I don't watch that crap anymore.
Well, I think you're absolutely right to be extremely skeptical of those ideas.
All right, Bernie Sanders.
An independent senator, not a Democratic senator. And hey, while we're talking about MSNBC real quick, I actually have a couple of clips that I wanted to share with you. This is from Dylan Ratigan. Yes, that Dylan Ratigan, the Dylan Ratigan that used to be on MSNBC. And here's Dylan Ratigan giving a speech that would never, ever air on MSNBC.
Got him fired, didn't it?
Well, he left MSNBC after realizing that his political naivete was so great that he actually had to go make changes in his own life rather than try to keep slamming up against this brick wall of the corporate media. And here's Dylan Ratigan giving a speech to a Zeitgeist group in San Diego talking about how naive Dylan Ratigan was up until about 2009 or 2010. This is so important.
It's obvious that I have been exposed to a lot of the truth and realities of both the incentives in our financial system, the incentives in our media system. I have been exposed to my own naivete in believing that a direct interaction with the arms of power in our financial and media system may have some value if you manipulate the power that you have, and I had for periods of time significant influence within some of those communities, that if you use that in a certain way that you can actually have a positive impact. In order to feel that that's an appropriate use of your time and energy, you have to have the belief that there are honest actors involved in the system, or at the very least there are people who want to be honest actors involved in the system, and that given the opportunity to make better decisions or different decisions, that those decisions would even be considered. I was one of the people that would largely describe my worldview, I would say, up until 2008 or 9.
And real quick, here are the 3 things that Dylan Ratigan learned from MSNBC. Listen to this.
By the time I got done 3 years at MSNBC, it was apparent to me that A, the solutions to pretty much all of our problems already exist. B, that the people who have the power to scale those solutions have no interest or economic incentive or media, and there's no incentive of any kind to do it. And that pretending that we don't know what the solution is the easiest way to perpetuate the system.
And that's MSNBC, and why I don't watch it, and why Dylan Ratigan doesn't work there anymore. And on that note, we are at the top of the hour on the Nicole Sandler Show. If you're just joining us, Skeptical Scott, Jacob Dean here at Filter Free Radio. This is our very last day filling in for Nicole Sandler. Nicole is going to be back in action tomorrow, back to normal here on RadioOrNot.com. And it is time to check in with the Talk Radio News Service, talkradionews.com on the Nicole Sandler Show.
I read the news today, oh boy.
And good morning. Who do we have on the line with us?
Good morning. This is Luke Vargas, your reporter at the United Nations.
Good morning, Luke. Pleasure to speak with you. What's happening in the world today?
Well, let's start in the United States, something that I enjoy talking about energy topics quite a bit, and something that caught my attention is a new emergency order by federal regulators that was actually announced yesterday that concerns the transport of shale gas shale oil, rather, via freight train. Of course, the bigger story here is the pending likely approval, I would say, of the Keystone Oil Pipeline. But whether or not that pipeline is approved, the reality is that tens of thousands of freight cars are going to be used for decades, probably, to take this oil towards, basically sea terminals around the country.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been a rocky road. What is, typically thought of as a safer alternative by some environmentalists than a pipeline has actually proved to be quite dangerous over the past few years. You'll probably remember last July there was a large explosion in Quebec when I think it was about 70 rail cars carrying this shale oil exploded and killed 47 people, destroyed 30 buildings within a city. I mean, this stuff is very hazardous. And what these federal regulators had found over the past few months was that when trucks were transporting this oil towards rail terminals up in North Dakota and in Montana for it to be taken around the country, they were mislabeling how dangerous the different types of oil were. Now, as I understand it, there is a kind of a large classification of how dangerous particular types of this shale oil is. It comes, from very far underneath the surface, and it comes out in all different sorts of levels of danger. And what had been happening is that they had been mislabeled, and consequently, very dangerous, samples of this oil were being put into rail cars that just were not equipped to handle it. And if they were to derail, it could cause similar types of explosions as we saw last year. And these regulators, in 11 of 18 samples, found quite significant mislabeling was going on. So all in all, this just proves that this alternative to the pipeline really is also a Wild West itself. And there are existing safety problems that will probably take a good deal of effort to clean up.
Yeah, Luke, I'm over here in Portland, Oregon, and we've been very active in fighting all of the coal exporting proposals, and I've been following that very closely as well. And it's very scary to see the progression forward at this point. And this is my opinion, of course, not the news. I'm just saying that I wish we could focus on renewable, sustainable energy that wouldn't harm the climate. But that's my opinion.
Well, you're right to say it does feel a little bit like a false choice to say, oh, well, this oil is going to be extracted. How do you want it delivered? Do you want to? If you don't want a pipeline, then we've got to take it on these trains. There are certainly more options than that. So, we obviously understand the president has pressure, likely from those drillers who want to exploit this, these reserves, and it seems like he's deciding between the options that they've presented him at this point.
Absolutely, yesterday the story comes out of the ExxonMobil CEO, who's going against this fracking operation, not because fracking's bad, but because it might endanger his multi-million-dollar mansion in Texas. But that's other news. What other news do you have for us, Luke?
Well, something that I find to be quite interesting, I actually returned from Ukraine a few weeks ago before all the violence there flared up, and I talked to Nicole about it on this very program. And one of the things I found very comforting as an American over there was the professionalism of the staff at the embassy, and not least the fact that the ambassador to the Ukraine from the U.S. Was very active on social media. He would come to the protests, and he was quite eloquent and informed about the situation in the country. And I bring this up because the American Foreign Service Association, which is essentially the labor union for career diplomats in the United States, particularly in the State Department, has announced that it is weighing a vote of no confidence next week on President Obama's nominees for the ambassadorships of Iceland, of Hungary, and of Norway. And this is after, in January, they appeared at a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing and were grilled by a number of Republicans, including most vocally John McCain, about their credentials. He forced them to admit they hadn't visited, some of them hadn't visited the country. They sort of forced them to goop up on making, characterizations of the types of governments that they had in Norway, and calling people presidents who are really prime ministers, et cetera, et cetera. And this is an interesting issue. I mean, I don't know exactly how I feel about it, but there's a very cool map that the Washington Post has put together that shows the ambassador posts that are being appointed this year. There are about 70 of them, and 23 are going to bundlers for Obama. These 23 men and women collectively have raised about $16 million for the president in the past 2 years. And this is, on the surface, a violation of the Foreign Service Act of 1980, which said that contributions to political campaigns should not be a factor in the appointment of an individual to be the chief of a mission overseas. But as we know, Obama is not the first president to do this. This is a popular practice to appoint political friends to take on posts around the world. And traditionally, it has happened in parts of the world where, American diplomacy, or at least the role of the ambassador, is sort of secondary. Oftentimes, Europe, countries where we have excellent diplomatic relations, and they're the places where, for example, a well-endowed bundler would want to go and live with their family. Spain, Portugal, Scandinavia, of course. But I think why this is very interesting now is that of these 23 appointees, many of them are going to Western Europe. And Europe, since the Snowden leaks, has become a place where diplomatic relations have been a little frostier. And I think there are a number of people in the foreign policy community at this point who normally don't weigh in on this topic, but are concerned about the fact that these roles are going to people who have spent less time or no time as career diplomats themselves, and that those sorts of individuals may be better off staffing some of these European embassies that, for decades now have primarily been headed by political appointees and fundraisers. So an interesting topic, coming, I think, into perspective after my travels to Ukraine, where a career diplomat is, in fact, the head of the embassy.
Yeah, that is interesting. I did catch what White House spokesman Jay Carney said about it last week. Words to the effect of, giving president the campaign donations doesn't guarantee you a job, but it doesn't hurt either. That wasn't exactly what he said, but words to the effect, sort of. Yeah. Luke, I'm curious. Can you talk a little bit about your trip and the significance to that?
Well, I went into a good deal of detail, when I was calling in from Independence Square, and Nicole and I talked maybe twice. I think it was at the beginning of the month. But I have to say, I don't think I've been on the program since returning, and it has been really difficult at times to, particularly when there was a lot of violence last week, to report on this story from the United Nations. The United Nations really took a back seat during this whole conflict, and I have to say the European Union seemed to do a pretty good job filling their shoes and sending the so-called, I think, the Weimar Triangle group of foreign secretaries from Poland, Germany, and France to go over there and talk to the president. But it was really excruciating to be basically limited to pretty watered-down statements from the UN, as all my sources, who I just the previous week been having tea with and walking around the square with in Kiev, were now sending me messages about all the horrible things they were seeing. And I know it seems so different only a few days later to have, many of the messages of those demonstrators sort of the consensus narrative of this new transitional government. But for a while there, it really did not seem like there was going to be a change of power, and I was left in this very uncomfortable position of sitting in the briefing room at the UN and seeing the photos I was being sent from my sources there of the fighting and really not hearing anything at the United Nations. So I'm glad that the violence has passed, and it is quite interesting. During my trip with my colleague Zach, we went down to southern Ukraine, the Crimea, actually the kind of Sevastopol, where it was believed the president was spending some time over the past few days, sort of a stronghold with a large Russian military presence there, and where Russia is apparently weighing sending tens of thousands more troops now. And it's quite interesting to see that after a few months of hearing the grievances of demonstrators in Kiev and people who were supportive of the protest movement, the narrative has really shifted. And now, almost more than anything, we're hearing the grievances of the Russian-speaking portion of Ukraine, that they really wouldn't be so unhappy not being a part of the future political transition that's happening in Kiev. Obviously, they'd like to be represented, but they don't really want to go along if Kiev is going to start making overtures to the West at the expense of its ties to Russia. And it's quite remarkable to see how the Russian military angle has come into the story, how the Crimean angle, which was pretty much dead silent while we were there, and sort of took a gamble on going to that part of the country, is now one of the foremost headlines on Ukraine at this point. And I think it will be for the next few weeks as Russia tries to exert some influence on the government in Kiev by talking about the military and talking about the Crimea and suggesting secession. It's a big shift.
Yeah. Luke, I very much appreciate the update. I missed your first report when you were there on Nicole's show, so I really appreciate you catching me up and giving Nicole's listeners an update. Luke, before I let you go, was there anything else in the world that you think we should know about going on?
Well, it's returning to the domestic angle. I've been, it's both international and domestic. I mean, I've been reporting on the Ugandan anti-gay legislation, which, among other things, prescribes some very harsh penalties for homosexual behavior in the country, including 14 years in prison for a first offense, and then lifetime in prison for a second offense. And then, over this whole thing, we've got this bill in Arizona, which, as of today, looks to be losing government support within the state. There have been a number of Republican legislators, state legislators, who are starting to back down on supporting this, likely because of the full court press on this legislation. But what is so interesting, I feel at least, and it's a little depressing to diagnose this, is that it's been more the economic messages that have been making the case for these legislators for why they shouldn't support the bill. It's not the op-eds being written or the posts about lost human dignity when your human civil and human rights abuses that come along with denying service to LGBT customers. But actually the fact that the Super Bowl was the NFL was threatening to move the Super Bowl, and that Apple Computers, which is thinking of building a factory in the state, that they might reconsider if this bill goes through. And it just sort of shows you what the priority is, if that is the case, for government, like legislators in Arizona, that they care more about those millions, billions of dollars than they do about the complaints of injustice.
It's always all about the money. What do you do? Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News Service reporter at the UN. Luke, I very much appreciate your reporting, your update, and man, we're gonna have to get you back on to dive back into the Ukraine crisis, and while that's still going on, it's fantastic to be able to talk with someone who's been on the ground there at least, so.
Sure thing. I'd be happy to contribute a report as needed.
Fantastic. Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News Service, talkradionews.com. Luke, thank you so much for the brilliant reporting.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Talk Radio News Service, talkradionews.com is the website, talkradionews.com. And check out, as we mentioned yesterday, just for Ellen, goatsfortheoldgoat.com. You can do something really cool there. We are going to take another coffee warm-up and come back with more radical truth-telling. Chris Hedges, Cornel West, Noam Chomsky, and why the real left needs to be pushing further left. Next on The Nicole Sandler Show, radioornot.com.
The Nicole Sandler Show.
Hi, friends. This is Tom Hartman.
This is Stephanie Miller. Hey, this is Hal Sparks.
I'm Brad Friedman. I approve of Nicole Sandler's RadioOrNot.com.
Radio or Not.
Radio or Not. RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com.
Filter-free radio.
Filter-free radio.
Filter-free radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
But I just don't subscribe to the common memes, and I don't subscribe to either political parties anymore because they don't represent us. They represent, their own interest, obviously, and furthering their own interests, and furthering the interest of wealthy financiers who obviously pay for them to get elected, and that's who they serve. So what do you do in this situation where obviously changing the players doesn't change the game? It's like you can vote, but don't spend more than 5 minutes on it. than the time it takes to go to the polls and pull the lever and then move on and then get back out in the streets and protest with your signs and raise awareness and educate people.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
And that comes from reading. I mean, really, you have to start reading alternative critical thinkers, the Noam Chomskys of the world, the late Howard Zinn, people who document these things. Activism is what brings about change, and change comes from physically being in the streets. The biggest lie is that I'm an internet activist. Well, there's no such thing. You're either an activist or you're not, but there is no internet activist. It's like, well, that means you don't get out of the house, which means you don't really accomplish anything. You know, you're not organizing, you're not getting people together in the streets, you're not actually pushing for a real change that you want to see. You're just more talking about it online, which is the same as a conference call.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Albert Klein. Facing widespread denouncement for calling President Obama a, quote, subhuman mongrel, Ted Nugent promised to stop calling people names on CNN's Aaron Burnett Out Front.
Are you going to say that you're never going to call people names again?
February 24th, 2014. I'm not going to call people names anymore.
But with the promise hanging in the air, Nugent labeled Obama a liar and suggested he is a criminal.
Instead of using terms like subhuman mongrel, I'm going to get right to the meat of the matter, where our president is a liar. He lies about you can keep your doctor, period, over and over again. He lies about Benghazi. He's lying about the IRS. So I won't call names anymore. I'm going to get right down to the nitty-gritty and identify the criminal behavior by the people abusing power in the United States government. So I take your advice to heart, Aaron.
For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Hey friends, Jacob Dean here with exciting news. You can now hear my show, Filter Free Radio, on the free Stitcher mobile app. Just download the free Stitcher app from Stitcher.com or in the App Store and search for Filter Free Radio. That's all there is to it. No syncing, no taking up memory on your device. Just Filter Free Radio on demand for you on the go. Plus, you can rate and review Filter Free Radio on Stitcher. The more you rate, review, and share us, the higher we will rank on Stitcher, and that means the more people will discover Filter Free Radio. It's never been easier to enjoy Filter Free Radio and help us spread the word. So download the free Stitcher app, search for Filter Free Radio, and start benefiting from unfiltered radical truth-telling anytime, anywhere. Thanks, and keep up the good fight.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to The Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Your view is not being represented in this country because all of our views have been corrupted by money and politics. Remember, 94% of the time, the candidate who raises the most money wins.
That's the fact that we need to drive home constantly. It's all about the money. Dylan Radigan, you rock.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime at RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com and SoFloRadio.com present The Nicole Sandler Show. Truth to power, baby.
Oh my goodness, I'm getting sad. It's our last segment together, filling in for The Nicole Sandler Show. Jacob Dean, Skeptical Scott here. We host the program Filter Free Radio on FilterFreeRadio.com and on Nicole Sandler's Radio or Not.com network. Really hope you check it out. By now, after the fifth day, I know you're getting tired of us, and it's all good. Nicole's going to be back in action tomorrow, back to normal. So, damn you, Jacob and Scott, you guys, I'm just tired of you. You guys don't even talk about the news, what's happening. I mean, I turn on Good Morning America, and they're telling me that the news is fast food breakfast. Look out, McDonald's, because Taco Bell has got your number. And, well, I went downstairs, grabbed a cup of coffee, took a look at the TV, and they're talking about fast food breakfast as if that's news. And then I said, well, wait a minute. If that's the news, then I've got a newsworthy clip to share with you. Here you go.
Americans love to eat. They are fatally attracted to the slow death of fast food. Hot dogs, corn dogs, triple bacon cheeseburgers, deep fried butter dipped in pork fat and cheese whiz, mayonnaise soaked barbecued mozzarella patty melts. Americans will eat anything. If you were selling sauteed raccoons' assholes on a stick, Americans would buy them and eat them.
So there you go. Whatever.
Yeah. Taco Bell is going to get into the breakfast business. Wow. That means, what is it? What's the breakdown? I think it was 38% of their beef is actual beef. So I can only imagine what their eggs and I don't even want to think about it. It's just disgusting.
Yeah. I missed a phone call from someone who was trying to call into the program, and you were calling during the break when I was downstairs getting coffee and going to the bathroom. So the phone line is open. I'm in front of the call screen software now. The phone number 503-746-TALK. If you want to call in, this is your last shot, and callers will go to the front of the line. If you call in, you'll get on the air. I promise. Unless someone else is already on the air. I want to play some clips. I got lots of clips, all sorts of clips. Hopefully, most of these you've never heard of or you've never heard before. And I want to start with kind of the premise of Scott and I's conversations and our show, and that is being outside game. You know, there's an inside game and an outside game. The traditional inside game, voting for the right candidate, trying to elect the right candidate, appeal to their, common good, decency, and then maybe get some change. The outside game, agitating, organizing people, successful social movements. Here is one of the people a lot of people look to as far as pragmatic steps for people to get active. Saul Alinsky. This is Saul Alinsky in an interview by Studs Terkel back in the day on being a professional outside agitator and why you cannot be an agitator on the inside. It doesn't work that way.
If you were to describe Saul as a professional agitator, what would your reaction be to that description?
You left out one word, Studs. Professional outside agitator. You see, you got to be an outside agitator to begin with, because agitators very rarely come up from the inside. Because if you come up from the inside, one of two things happens to you. Either you get knocked off, or you get co-opted. That's the reason all agitators are outside agitators.
If you agitate from the inside, you're either going to get knocked off or co-opted. So, yeah, you got to.
Yeah, you don't have that Chris Hedges clip where he quotes Karl Popper from his book An Open Society and Its Enemies, where he says, the question is not how to get good people to rule. Those who are attracted to power are at best mediocre and more often venal. And of course, venal means easily bribable or morally bankrupt. But the question is, how do we make those in power afraid of us? Mm-hmm. And that is really the question, because those in power are obviously afraid of the Koch brothers and the ExxonMobil heads and all the multi-billionaires who control them. Because let's face it, they can ruin their lives, or they can make them very wealthy by giving them speaking fees, a la Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. And then they can be taken care of the rest of their life. And Bill Clinton became a multimillionaire after leaving office, where he was not prior to office. And that is basically the paradigm with which our elected officials, live through this revolving door. You can either be ruined or assassinated, or you can be made very, very wealthy. Your choice.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if this is the clip you're specifically referencing, but I do have a couple of clips of Chris Hedges ready. This is from the Empire of Illusion conversation, and one of my personal favorites. This is the end of his speech. Gave a speech on the book Empire of Illusion. If you don't know, if you haven't read it yet, it's right here. You should read it and get yourself a copy of this book and read it. It's very important. And then once you read Empire of Illusion, you have to read the sequel, which is The Death of the Liberal Class, and that explains so much. I'm holding up the books for the camera if you're not watching us on the video stream. Here is Chris Hedges' Empire of Illusion on why we have to fight back if we have a chance.
We forgot that social reform never comes from accommodating the power structure, but from frightening it. The Liberty Party, which fought slavery, the suffragists who battled for women's rights, the labor movement, and the civil rights movement knew that the question was not, how do we get good people to rule? Most of those attracted to power are at best mediocrities and often venal. But how do we limit the damage the powerful do to us? These mass movements were the real engines for social reform, the correctives to our democracy, and the true protectors of the rights of citizens. We must begin to opt out of the mainstream. We must rebuild socialism as a viable political force. We must no longer be content with the crumbs tossed to us in the vain hope that we can influence the power elite from the inside. We must become as militant as those who are seeking our enslavement. If we remain passive, we will soon be engulfed by a ruthless, totalitarian capitalism. If we remain passive as we undergo the largest transference of wealth upwards in American history, we will become serfs. If we fight back, we have a chance.
If we fight back, we have a chance. Our telephone number, 503-746-TALK. You go to the front of the line if you want to call in. We have a caller on the line in the 916 area code. Caller, you want to tell us your first name, where you're calling from, and what's on your mind?
Yeah, Sandra, I'm calling from, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, great. I'm calling from Sacramento, California. No, I just called just to, take up your challenge. But, I've enjoyed you guys being on the show. And, although you're not talking a lot about every single issue that's popping up in the news, I mean, you seem to be doing the systems analysis, which is, refreshing to hear. The thing I wanted to mention was, I think a couple of days, or maybe it was yesterday, you were talking about the military so-called scaling down. And, what I think is interesting is it seems to be this push to, where you had capital exploiting, now you have capital, they don't want to exploit you. And so you're looking at kind of more of a eliminationist type of rhetoric that's coming out now, which I find deeply disturbing because what are they planning on doing with all these people who can't work? Because our system is designed to, if you don't work, you literally starve in our system. So we seem to have going through a period where we have a bunch of people who can't manage to survive in this system.
Right. What choice do we have exactly? You have to exist, right? And you have to have money in this world, in today's world, in order to exist. So, I mean, they got you by the throat. I mean, what do you do, right?
Well, you're absolutely right, Sandra. I mean, what it is it speaks a lot to what Chris Hedges talks about, where he says, they don't care about us anymore. We are being cast aside, and it's part of the totalitarianism. That's part of the fascist aspect of the corporate state, is that they're basically just raping and pillaging and gathering up all that's left, and they don't care about us. I mean, we have more homeless now.
Go ahead, Sandra. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Well, I just was. If you look at even a bigger picture, is that you have literally billions of people who are and have always been completely marginalized, barely subsisting. And obviously, in your day-to-day life in the first world, it's not a concern. But I find it interesting that, the OECD states now are, facing the real possibility of all this, quote, surplus people or unpeople, as Chomsky makes out. I just find the whole, this whole discussion about what are these policymakers going to do? Yeah. Because the jobs aren't coming back. And I'm not down for infinite growth forever because the ecological situation bodes against that. But, are we looking at people just sort of gathering what they can and getting the hell on and that sort of scenario, or what? I don't know.
You see, the rats are scrambling for the last bits of cheese because they all realize that the ship is sinking. So you see the rats scrambling for the last bits of cheese. And I totally get what you're saying, Sandra. If the entire world consumed as much as we consume here in America, we would need something like 4 or 5 planet Earths worth of resources.
I think it's 8 planet Earths. It's actually 8, yeah.
Or something like that. Is that close to what you're saying?
Well, yeah, but I'm also the only other thing I'll say, and I'll let you go. But is when you talk about getting off the grid, and I appreciate the sort of talk about that sort of stuff. But I also need to point out that no, your ass is not going to be left alone to be off the grid, because all the people who didn't get off the grid. Do you think they're going to let you stay off the grid with your food and your solar panels and your this, that, and the third? That's all. I just think that that attitude is fine, but I don't think it's dealing in the real world as it exists.
Sure.
If that comes down, because no one's going to starve. I mean, can you see white America, trying to come to terms with that?
Yeah.
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, that also speaks to the need for community, and that's part of the relocalization. I mean, it's not just on an individual basis, but on a communal basis. Like, for example, if a neighborhood were to put up their own wind turbine, and that neighborhood or that city or town would be able to have its own.
Okay.
So glad Sandra called in too. That was really good.
My sincerest apologies, friends. Just had a major computer crash here on my end. And I want to thank Sandra for calling in, and my sincerest apologies, Sandra, for the computer and the whole show going down during our conversation. It had absolutely nothing to do with you. Thank you so much for calling in. And
Unless you believe in NSA conspiracies.
If anyone else wants to call into the show, the telephone number is 503-746-TALK. It takes me a couple of minutes to write everything that scrolls across the top of the screen, and so nothing's scrolling now because I just wanted to get back up onto the show.
Scroll.
So
just need to make sure we're on the air.
And we're on the air. We're back. It's my apologies. TalkRadio1.com is back up. I believe SoFloRadio.com is back up. RadioOrNot.com is back up. And Liberal Justice Radio is back up. My apologies there.
Awesome.
And
what little time we have left, if I could finish our conversation with Sandra.
Yeah.
She was absolutely right. I mean, the whole notion that you can be an individual in this society and protect yourself while all of society crumbles is naive at best, because we have to form communities. We have to form support groups and support systems because that's what human beings are. Human beings are inherently communal.
Yep.
And we to take care of one another. I mean, it's the whole. Jeremy Rifkin did a speech a long time ago. You can see it on YouTube or on my blog about empathy, about how we need to expand our empathy because human beings inherently care more about themselves and then their family, and then next becomes their friends, and next becomes their community, and the next becomes their country. And if we can expand that empathy out to on a global scale for all human beings, to have the empathy for all of humanity, well, then we got something. Then we can really start to take on these challenges of climate change and of survival of our species. I mean, let's face it. I mean, our species is on its way out, as with all species, and we can do what we can to prevent that. I think it's important to become empathetic to the plight of others, and in doing so, in forming these communities, you start to. It's part of resistance works on two tracks. One, setting up alternatives to the current system, and two, bringing down the current system. And so part of that alternative, because you have to give people something else to go from. I mean, if they can no longer go to the grocery store, where are they going to get their food from? Well, you have farmers markets, you have community co-ops, you have people getting together and sharing food and helping each other grow their own food and raise their own chickens and pigs and whatever. And you have a relocalization of your food economy, just like you would have a relocalization of anything that relates to the basic human existence, rather than this whole national food industrial complex, this whole national energy industrial complex, etc. And so, you'd have local windmills and you'd have local solar arrays that would be enough for these cities and towns and neighborhoods and communities and whatever, and denationalize much of where our existence relies on. Mm-hmm. I mean, in that way you get the money out of the big wealthy business interests who control us. And also, I mean, let's face it, that system's unsustainable anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's about building local sustainability and regrowing agrarian culture and society and just basic needs in living. And then I think in doing so, we'll have a much better quality of life. I think less of us will be sick from all the poisons that we ingest every day from the petrochemical industries, et cetera. And so it's really it's about forming alternative lifestyles and making it sustainable that other people would want to do that. And certainly, I think Sandra was spot on about the need for community and the need for not just individual solutions, but obviously sustainable large scale solutions.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, and the idea that we can talk about it's going to collapse, and when it collapses, those who are most prepared for the collapse are going to be okay. Yeah.
I don't want a Mad Max Road Warrior system as Jay.
Right. No one wants that, right? And and I think the other part of it is we do not have the logistics in place yet for the alternatives to switch on to. Like, we need to get off fossil fuel industry. Well, we don't really have the full electric car fleet ready yet. The logistics for the alternatives are not quite there yet, and we have to create the logistics on which the alternatives are possible.
That's what Chris Hedges says. He goes, right now our struggle is not ideological because most people agree how shit is fucked up. The struggle is logistical, and that means giving people an alternative to the current corrupt system because most people don't know anything else. A lot of people don't even know where their food comes from or what's in it, much less genetically modified pesticides, et cetera, et cetera. They just know they go to the grocery store and they buy it, or the fast food and they buy it, and they're so busy trying to make ends meet with their day-to-day lives that they don't have a chance to sit back and actually question the system for which they live under. And it's very oppressive. I mean, this is how oppression works. You keep people stressed and indentured and not able to ask the tough questions or even have the capacity to resist because they don't have that comfort zone where they can afford to resist.
Yeah. Folks are participating in the conversation over at radioornot.com. And if you're just joining us, if you tuned in and we had dead air, Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott here at Filter Free Radio, our last 15 minutes or so filling in for Nicole Sandler. It's been a fantastic week. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as we have. And Nicole's going to be back in tomorrow, back to normal on the Nicole Sandler Show. So I know some folks are excited about that. And last Thursday, when we tried to do a clip show for about half an hour, we ended up with only playing one Howard Zinn clip, and I'd like to move into a couple of Howard Zinn clips now while I still have time. And to start off the Howard Zinn conversation real quick, here's Matt Damon.
You want to read a real history book, read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. That book will fucking knock you on your ass.
So there you go.
Yeah, well, Good Will Hunting, which ironically is how I heard of Howard Zinn in the first place, by watching the movie Good Will Hunting. Jeez.
And the idea of Howard Zinn is just all about breaking down paradigms that you've been fed your whole life, breaking down the idea that, we should respect our founding fathers of this country. What for? You mean the rich, old, white, slaveholding, didn't think women should be allowed to vote founding fathers? Those guys, they were great, right?
Yeah, human beings are property. They're rich white landowning men who didn't want to pay their taxes to England. It's like, sound familiar today?
Yeah. Here, I want to play this. The solution is when people get active and create real change. And remember, the government's interests are not always the same as our best interests.
There were some breakthroughs, there were some oddities, there were some moments in history when this was not true. In the 1930s, something happened. In the 1960s, something happened. What happened is that people rose up all over the country and demanded change. And the demands grew so loud and so threatening that then, in the 1930s, we got Social Security and we got unemployment insurance and we got subsidized housing. And in the 60s, we got Medicare and Medicaid. So there have been moments in our history when the people and their desires and their anguish over their situation has broken through. And then we got legislation that moved away from the traditional upper-class legislation of the government. But it is extremely important to understand this conflict of interest between government and us. Nor is Exxon's interest the same as mine, nor Halliburton's interest the same as mine. No, that's a very important thing to learn, I think, from history.
Hey, looking at history. What an idea. Maybe we could learn from history and not repeat it. Oh, what an idea.
That's the whole lie. That's the whole lie that the propaganda, rather, the corporate media would have you believe, is that the whole notion of tax is that as if we're all in the same tax bracket, and so we don't need to tax people too much. Well, the problem is, as we've learned in the last 30 years, is that, and Leona Helmsley said this famously, is that only the little people pay taxes. And that's where we are. The very wealthy are not paying their fair share. And that's why you have such wealth inequality being exponentially increased. And they take that extra money that they're not paying in taxes, and they buy elected officials to further their own greed. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. And here we are.
Yep. But you can't tax your way out of a systemic problem, though. That's the other part
no,
of it.
I'm not advocating for that,
So-
but I'm just
right.
saying how we got here.
Right. Here is one more clip from Howard Zinn we have to get in before the show's over. It's crucial that I can't say it enough. We, the people, have the power. The people have the power, not the corporations. It's not just me who thinks this. Here's back to Howard Zinn.
The fact is, governments, like all powerful entities, are vulnerable. The government needs people to obey it in order to keep power. When people stop obeying, the government loses its power. Corporations need people to work for it. When people stop working for corporations, then the corporation is helpless. We saw this in the 1930s, General Motors and Ford, huge corporations. We're not going to have a union here. But when the workers left the factories, or even when they sat in the factories and wouldn't let production go on, General Motors was helpless. And so it's important to keep in mind that the power of the establishment rests on our obedience. When we start disobeying, and that's where the great people in our history come in. That's where Thoreau comes in, Helen Keller comes in, and Emma Goldman comes in, and Mark Twain comes in, and Eugene Debs, and Fannie Lou Hamer, and Martin Luther King. That's where they come in. When that happens, then something will change. And our job is to participate in that process.
Our job is to participate in that process.
God, I miss Howard Zinn.
Don't you?
Yeah, he's brilliant. And Noam Chomsky and Chris Hedges, I think, are the next heir, and Cornel West, and there are quite a few other Howard Zinn-esque individuals out there today, but he was one of the most prolific.
Yeah, and going back to what Sandra mentioned, our call. Hey, we got 10, 15 minutes if you want to call in. Callers will go to the front of the line, 503-746-TALK. Not talking about symptoms of the problem and not trying to address symptoms of the problem, but rather trying to address the causes of those problems, the causes of those symptoms. It's like you get a head cold and you take cough medicine or nasal decongestant or whatever. You're treating the symptoms of the problem and you're not treating the causes of the problem. Why did you get sick in the first place? Are you getting enough nutritious, healthy food, for example? Maybe that's more of an appropriate use of time and focus and energy. That's what we try to do. I mean, we can sit here and talk about he said, she said, and this and that all day long with the best of them, sure. But that's addressing the symptoms. And if we can get to the causes of those problems, then, hey, the symptoms will go away. That sounds
like a Derek Jensen clip there you got there, buddy.
I want to play some Noam Chomsky. We didn't get into Noam Chomsky much.
Or Cornel West, for that matter.
So let's do it. We got 10 minutes. Here's Noam Chomsky talking about how elections and campaigns are a joke. Good stuff.
Elections have, for a long time, been pretty much public relations extravaganzas. They only marginally deal with issues. They're mostly show. They're run by the public relations industry. It has a goal: create a society in which uninformed people make irrational decisions. That's essentially the structure of presidential campaigns.
Exactly. See, they don't benefit you from knowing what's going on. They benefit from you not knowing what's going on.
Uninformed people making irrational decisions. That's elections today.
Here it is. Here's the goal of propaganda, the goal of marketing, the goal of the Democratic Party, the goal of Fox News. Here's their goal right here.
If you take an economics course, you're taught that the markets are based on informed consumers making rational choices. But anyone who's ever looked at a television ad knows that the goal of those who structure the market is to create uninformed consumers who make irrational choices.
An example of an uninformed consumer making an irrational decision might be, hey, I'm watching a new car ad. I'd never buy a new car, but my favorite celebrity is in the ad driving that car. And if Ron Burgundy buys a Dodge, I'm going to go buy a Dodge.
Oh yeah, I talk to people who spend $1,000 on these these women spend $1,000 on these red bottom high heel shoes because it makes them look good. $1,000, and they're, by the way, uncomfortable for most women. But, it makes them look good and feel good. And I think Sarah Jessica Parker wore them on Sex and the City, and now everybody has to have them. And that's the whole limbic brain. Our brains are wired such that emotions always trump rational thought. And so marketing and propaganda, and Edward Bernays discovered this years ago when he first came about with his PR, or actually propaganda, which became public relations. And that is that if you can manipulate people's emotions, they won't be able to think rationally, and then you can get them to do whatever you want, which is buying your product or voting for this person.
I'm holding up Edward Bernays' propaganda book for the people who are watching us on the video stream. You have to read. This is what Scott's talking about. Edward Bernays, he wrote the book on propaganda in 1920s. Or you have to read Chris Hedges' The Empire of Illusion. Or you have to read something like Death of the Liberal Class from Chris Hedges. Or, but wait, here's a good one. People are talking about Derek Jensen in the chat room. Read Derek Jensen's Endgame, The Problem of Civilization. You have to read. I don't like reading. No, neither do I. But you got to do it.
Most people do give lectures. Most of them do give lectures on YouTube, which is helpful. I prefer. I'm not much of a reader. I mean, I do read articles, but sitting down and reading a whole book is a bit of a commitment for me. So, in addition to reading my daily news articles on common dreams, etc., I do love the YouTube lectures by these people, by Chris Hedges, Cornel West, Noam Chomsky, Dwayne. I mean, I'm looking at Dwayne actually, Derek Jensen. And others who are actually available, and Howard Zinn for that matter, on YouTube, and you can sit there for hours and listen to them talk about this wisdom, which is where these clips have come from.
And of course, we're shifting away from a print-based society into an image-based society, like all totalitarian states do. And in that, you see many people not willing to read anymore. And they need pictures and audio and things. And I'm with you. I'd much rather listen to audio or watch a video of Derek Jensen, which there are plenty on YouTube, than try to sit down and read the book. But if you sit down and read the book, then you get the whole gist of it, and the goods of it, as my grandpa would say. You get the goods of it. So, a couple of minutes left. A couple of clips we can fit in here. One of the most memorable moments of my life, one of the most important things that I've ever personally participated in, was the night when Scott and I went and witnessed Dr. Cornel West giving a keynote address at, was it George Washington University, I think there?
That's correct.
In Washington, D.C. Scott and I went one night. Cornel West was giving a keynote speech.
For an hour and a half with no notes. It was amazing.
And it was one of the most memorable moments of my life. We talked about it a lot on the show, and I don't have much time to tell you about it. You can find stuff about it on our website. But Dr. Cornel West is one of the best. And here's a couple of clips I have. I love these, talking about, he's a big advocate of fighting, the war on poverty. And it's not just poverty of economic status, but it's poverty of the imagination we have today.
Well, one, we need a conversation. We got a lot of creativity, imagination, intelligence in the nation. If we made it a priority, people would be able to come up with magnificent programs and strategies and taxes. But one thing we need to know, that we can't tax our way through it. It's got to be a matter of full employment, which is to say jobs with a living wage. We got to have quality education. We've got to have the right kind of motivation. And people want to use their imaginations to be part of something bigger than them. So it's when we talk about poverty, we're not just talking about material poverty. We've had a poverty of imagination. We've had a poverty of courage. We've had a poverty of compassion. And it's a matter of accenting the kind of thing Brother Martin Luther King Jr. died for.
Yeah, right. Here's one more clip. I love this. This is from the Tom Hartman program, the program that I used to produce for. And listen to what Cornel West says is the responsibility of the corporations in this clip. This is great.
The blind spots of capitalism are twofold. Too much wealth inequality and not enough jobs with a living wage for full employment. But it's not just jobs for jobs' sake. It's jobs that have to do with building our bridges, our sewers, building infrastructures across the board, jobs for teaching corps, jobs that contribute to public interest and common good. So that in that sense, government does have a role, but private sector has a very important role to play too, though, bro.
Yeah, and what is that?
To be fair and not just be greedy.
But I mean, corporations kind of by definition are sociopaths. They are focused entirely on profits, and they only respond to laws in terms of any kind of moral compass. Don't we have to legislate that?
Well, you have to at least have regulation and legislation. You're absolutely right.
But that's
as
not enough.
You know, can't just be regulation on the books. It's got to be effective regulation on the ground, and that's what's so difficult.
Right.
We've got banks now are too big to regulate. It's impossible to regulate these big banks now. What is it now? They got $7 trillion. They've gained access to with relatively interest-free loans from the Federal Reserve. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
$7 trillion being used to build bridges, generating jobs, trying to eliminate this indecent housing, disgraceful school systems, and making sure that every American citizen can live a life of dignity.
Woo! Dignity. What a radical idea. Oh, my goodness. Okay. So we've got about 3 minutes left. Probably not enough time to take another call if you were trying to get in. You can call us anytime on our comment line 24/7 and leave your voicemails. And we're more than happy to pick up the conversation on our program, filterfreeradio.com. I've got time to play, I think, a couple more clips, maybe one more clip. So we better make it a good one here. And this is Chris Hedges on how important it is to actually take a sober reading of reality and focus on what is real, the concrete. And I mean, yeah, we have illusions and we have fantasies, and the corporate media wants to distract you, but we have to really take a sober reading of reality if we are to assess reality and make progress and move forward.
A sober reading of reality is the best possibility for survival and hope. And if we continue within a state of illusion, then hope becomes impossible because every decision we make is not reality-based. And you can see it with the financial disfiguration of the country. That is an example of an illusion, and we're screwed.
So on that note, I still have probably another 50, 60 clips that I was planning on playing, and we're not going to have time to get into. And so maybe on Monday we can do a full filter-free radio best of clip show and not fuck around and do it. So maybe we'll have that to look forward to on Monday evening. And on that note, we've got a minute left. Scott, you get 30 seconds of it, brother. What is your take-home message?
I would say to be truly radical is to make hope possible rather than despair inevitable. And that means being active. That means being engaged. That means not being distracted by what the corporate state wants you to be distracted by. That means to shut out the poison, as Chris Hedges says, and to think in your own language, not the language they give you. And that requires reading. That requires being engaged. Go out in your community, do what you can on a day-to-day basis to live a sustainable lifestyle, and you start by doing basic rudimentary things to cut yourself off from the corporate state, whether it's shopping in a farmer's market, whether it's making your own soap, or buying your own home local handmade soaps. It starts with food. It starts with your basic chemicals that you use on a daily basis. It starts with what you put into your body and the communities and the social circles that you make that become sustainable, rather than just being reliant on individualism and going to this grocery store and buying this crap and driving your car and doing all the things that they want you to do. We have to step outside of the system and create an alternative narrative.
There you go, man. Lots of folks are saying great show in the chat room at radioornot.com. If you enjoy Scott and I filling in for Nicole Sandler, let Nicole know, send her a note or something, and maybe the next time Nicole takes a vacation, we'll be back in. Hey, we can only hope. I got to thank everyone who made this show possible. First and foremost, Nicole Sandler, for the opportunity, for the privilege and honor to be in for Nicole on Radio or Not. Everyone who syndicates the program, SoFloRadio.com, TalkRadio1.com, Kenny Pick on Liberal Justice Radio. Thank you, man. Thanks to all of our guests that we had on and all the callers. Thank you, Sandra, for calling in and making your voice heard. I love it. I love the participation. That's what it's all about. Thanks to Kevin McLeod of Incompetech.com, Dano Songs of DanoSongs.com for music production. Thanks to everyone in the chat room for participating in the conversation. Thank you for liking us, for spreading the word, helping us grow, grassroots, bottom up. That's what it's all about. And you remember, hey, we can't do it without you. I can't do it without you. And we all have to participate together. We all have to get active together to be the change and make a difference for all of us. Please keep up the good fight. We will see you Monday evening, filterfreeradio.com. Until then, kick ass, take names, question authority. We'll see you soon. Peace, love, jazz, all that good stuff.
Filter Free
There's
Radio.
a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop.
So give me something to believe, 'cause I am living just to believe, and I need something more to keep on breathing for. So give me something to believe.
The revolution will be broadcast
Monday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. Filter Free Radio.